There is a bit of a disconnect between the readings that we have today as we begin this season of Advent and what is going on out in the world around us. Out there, the Christmas decorations have been up since mid-November, and they're singing Christmas carols already. And here, we're talking about the end of the world. Last Sunday was Christ the King Sunday, the final Sunday of the church year, and the church year always ends like this, with God's people gathering to proclaim that despite appearances to the contrary, Jesus is Lord, King of kings, and Lord of lords, in fact, and that as God's people, we pledge ourselves to the values of God's kingdom first, before all others, no matter what. The end of one church year and the beginning of another always have this apocalyptic flavor to them. We get several Sundays in a row of disturbing messages. Keep awake, keep your eyes open, because a change is coming. The old world can't keep going on in the way that it has been, because there's too much injustice, too much greed, and no amount of holiday cheer can paper over it all anymore. The strong dominate the weak, the rich exploit the poor, but get ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. If this is not the peace and comfort and sweetness and light that you were hoping to find by coming to church on this Thanksgiving weekend, well, I suppose that is the irony of Advent. Going to church in Advent is not about peace and quiet. The season of Advent is a meditation on the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. It's serious stuff, I know. If you want cattle gently lowing and angels singing lullabies, you'll have to come back at Christmas. In the meantime, there is a suffering world out there, and Jesus has come and is coming to do something about it. This is how C.S. Lewis puts it in his book, Mere Christianity. He says, enemy-occupied territory, that's what this world is. Christianity is the story of how the rightful king has landed, you might say, landed in disguise, and is calling us all to take part in a great campaign of sabotage. Jesus and his first-century followers were literally living in enemy-occupied territory, in the occupied state of Jerusalem, slave to the world-dominating power of Rome. Jesus' revolutionary act of defiance was to say out loud that the Caesar of Rome was not the real king, that God was the real king. To pray for God's kingdom to come on earth, that was treason. And no matter how much Christianity has been domesticated over the centuries, continuing to pray the prayer that Jesus taught us, the Lord's Prayer, was then and is now an inherently political act. Your kingdom come on earth. Now, don't misunderstand me, please, and don't misunderstand C.S. Lewis either. When he said enemy-occupied territory, he was not talking about any particular contemporary political leader being the enemy, and neither am I. Lewis meant that our world is corrupt, and it is filled with evil, and that human beings are susceptible to evil, and that sometimes it feels like evil has gotten the upper hand. But our King, friends, is the King of love. Compassion is the central value of his kingdom. And compassion is the most important tool at our disposal in this great campaign of sabotage that we're being called to take part in. Whenever we see a failure of compassion in the world around us, we're called to get involved and to do whatever it is in our power to correct that failure of compassion. Right under the cover of our normal everyday lives, we are to use the compassion that God has planted within us to uphold a neighbor in need, to deflect a stereotype, to silence a bully, to help reveal the humanity of our sisters and brothers who were targeted for being different, humanity that some people would rather not see. And the thing is, if you can't see the humanity in another person, then it's you who are the one that is failing to act like a human being. What is it that makes us human anyway? Jesus uses an unusual phrase to describe himself in our gospel passage today. Therefore, you also must be ready, he says, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. The Son of Man. In the whole of the New Testament, Jesus never calls himself the Son of God. Other people call him that, yes, but the title that he chooses for himself is this obscure phrase, Son of Man. And he uses it all the time. What does he mean by it? It isn't just a convoluted way of referring to himself. Jesus also uses the word I lots of times. He could have just said, I am coming at an unexpected hour, but he didn't. When we call him the Son of God, we're insisting on his divinity. We're saying Jesus is not like us. He's good, but he's God, and we are not, so we are off the hook. But when Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, I think he's saying, I am like you. I am, in fact, the human being, the human being, the fully realized evolution of what it means to be a human being, of what human beings are capable of. Biblical scholar and theologian Walter Wink makes a strong case for this understanding of the phrase Son of Man in his 2001 book, The Human Being, Jesus and the Enigma of the Son of Man. Wink argues that Jesus borrowed this phrase from the prophet Ezekiel precisely because it reveals how divinity and humanity are connected and intertwined. In the first chapter of Ezekiel, the prophet has this mystical vision of God revealed as an exalted human being that Ezekiel calls the man. And the man then refers to Ezekiel throughout the rest of this book as Son of Man. Ezekiel was of the priestly class, and in the years that followed this prophecy, this prophetic book, the temple priests drew on this idea, this vision of God, and wrote a new prologue for the book of Genesis, crystallizing this Jewish understanding of creation. And this is what they wrote in the book of Genesis, inspired by the prophet Ezekiel. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So what is it that makes us human? Friends, we are human because we bear the image of God. And no human being is excluded from this heritage. The text itself makes clear that God's image is not confined to men only, but that it encompasses all genders. And then as Genesis goes on, we learn that God's image is shared by all the people of the earth, whether they are Jewish or not. All people, all classes, all creeds, all colors, all of us are made in God's image. And to dishonor any human being is to desecrate God's image. It's to spit in the face of God. And perhaps even worse, for our own soul anyway, it is to turn away from our own humanity. But here is some good news this Advent. We've come to a place this morning where our humanity can be restored. This church is a place of restoration, of healing and reconciliation. Every time that we are fed at this altar, we become Christ's body, and we are strengthened for the work that God is calling us to do. This is where we learn how to become fully human by following the example of the Son of Man, the most human being of all. There's a world of scared and lonely people out there right now. People who are longing for what it is that we have in here. Friends, I invite you this Advent to take them something from this table. Let them know that there is shelter in here and community, and that we're always looking for new people to join us in God's great work of compassion and love. Amen.